During childhood and socialization, when someone is a teenager, people develop expectations. Often they're not even aware that they're developing expectations. But whether they're aware of it or not, it doesn't matter. Those expectations are there. They've accumulated them through the people they came in contact with, through what they've been exposed to. It's not someone's fault, the type of conditioning they were subjected to. They have no choice. They had no option. But once they're older, they have an option to go for better. Once they're older, they have the ability to self-reflect, and when they see error, to go for solutions. That is the only responsibility a human being has. They can't be held accountable for how they were raised. They can be held accountable for holding on to how they were raised. And if how they were raised cannot be accounted for, then they have enabled and perpetrated injustice. That is how simple it is. I want you to remember the following. If you cannot write something down, then something is wrong. Look, if you have a village and people don't want you to put on loud music after 10 p.m., you can write that down. No loud music after 10 p.m. Once you write that down, you can also write why. Because after 10 p.m. people need to go to sleep. It's obvious. When you write it down, you can also explain in writing why. But let's say someone tells you that you need to be quiet, and you're not in a silent room, you're not in any social context that requires you to be quiet. For example, you're in a lecture or whatever. Everyone's having a good time, only you're not allowed to talk. But let's say they write this down. Kevin is not allowed to talk ever. Then you need to explain why. Oh, they can't explain why. Then you say, well, I don't like him. Why? Oh, because I want control. Oh, why do you want control? Because I don't want to face myself. Oh, so that means I'm a coward. So they can never write this down. Because once you write it down, you've documented it, and once it's documented, people now can use it as evidence. And once it can be used as evidence, now it can be used against you. If you write something down, people can question you about it. So if it's a rule after 10 p.m., no loud music, it's evidence that can be justified. It's evidence that can be accounted for. But once people encounter evidence that's abusive, or that's inconsistent, or that is way out of proportion, this is something people don't want. That's why in society, you have expectations that are documented. We call them laws, we call them regulations, and you have the government that administer those expectations. And then you also have expectations in daily life that you're not allowed to write down. Why? Because the moment you write those expectations down, you document them. And once you document them, it now can be used as evidence for later generations. That's why things as racism have become subtle. Because in the past, there were places where they would say no black people allowed or no Irish people allowed. It would only be racial. But because they documented their darkness, it could be used against them. So later on, they became more subtle in their darkness and they stopped documenting it. They began to use excuses here and there to make things complicated. That's another thing you need to understand. When an expectation cannot be accounted for, people won't document it. But if they don't document it, they can't demand it. You can only demand something that you document. That's why in the world you have contracts, or between countries you have treaties. When you document something, it becomes a valid agreement. But if there's something you want that you cannot account for, you cannot document it, because you'll be trapping yourself. For example, an employer cannot say that he wants you to work, And only when he feels like it, then he's going to pay you. If he would write that down, anyone would look at it and think, what? You have to work, and if he wants, he's going to pay you. So you can't write that down. But what he can do is, he can come with all types of conditions for the job that are vague. So when you do the job, he can suddenly fire you. And when he fires you and you go to your lawyer, he can come with a contract and says, well, for this reason I fired this individual. That's why any lawyer will tell you, when you get a contract, read it. And if there are terms in the contract that are way too broad, don't sign it. Because there's another trick that's used in the world. They come with broad concepts that can mean anything. Some concepts mean something in one situation and another thing in another. So how do you know what it means in this context? So that's also a way to hide expectations that you can't account for. So either they don't document anything, or if they have to document something, they will document it in such a way that is way too vague or way too broad. And that's how they can hide the exploitation. Always remember this, if you can't document it, something is wrong. And even if it's documented, check how it is documented. Look, we as believers, we are not troublemakers. We're not looking for fights. We're not looking for arguments. We reflect on things. And here's the thing, self-reflection can go too far. You're not the only human being around. That's true. And that's used against you to blackmail you into agreeing with society. But hold on a minute. If you're not the only human being around, that means that people can't expect everything from you. That means that when things go wrong, it's not just you. It can be others also. But this thing, you're never allowed to say in society. You're never allowed to hold society accountable. That's another unwritten rule that you can't document. People observe it, they can see its effect, but to actually document and say it like that, people are not willing to do that, because once you document it, you show that there is a problem. And once you show that there's a problem, now people cannot avoid it. And once people are forced to deal with the fact that there is a problem, they will be upset. And now they will look for victims to relieve themselves. So also remember this, when people do not want to operate in justice, it is because they've embraced darkness. They don't want to face themselves, and they don't ever want to be held accountable. Do not fight with such people to force them to recognize you. Do not fight with them to earn your recognition. Absolutely not. As if they are the ones permitting you to exist. They're not. When you have such people, make sure you don't have to deal with them as much as possible. Because such people will always come with unwritten rules. They're unwritten because they can't be accounted for. Just try this out once. Begin to write down everything people want from you, just for yourself. And check later if the things they want, if they add up. Do this with your parents. Reflect back on your childhood. State everything that was expected of you. Put it in a list. Put all the demands, all the expectations on paper. And the way you recognize a demand is when there was a punishment when you didn't do it. So put it all down and check whether it can be accounted for. And if you notice a pattern, namely, that's always you at fault when things go wrong, then you know these people are on their way to reprobation. Isn't it strange that people come with unwritten rules? They become upset with you for not giving in those unwritten rules, but they don't write them down. If you don't write something down and it's not documented, it can't be established. So why do they want you to hold on to things that are not established? Because once they are established, they need to be justified. And if they can't be justified, now people are exposed for holding on to something that can't be accounted for. And once this is exposed, they're now forced to comply with justice. They don't want that either. So to avoid conflict and people going off at one another in society, you're expected to get along with the status quo. You're expected to get along with expectations that are oppressive and never see or mention that they are oppressive. Believers, know what you're dealing with. If it can't be documented, something is wrong. Be at peace.